Today we'll be learning about counting numbers, also known as quantifiers, and that's how we will be referring to them in the video.
You may be asking, what are quantifiers? So quantifiers are the types of words that answer back to the questions of how much and how many. They are always located in front of a noun they define, but unless the sentence is understandable without the noun, then it's not needed. They indicate the quality of a noun and the numbers, amounts, etc. being expressed. So they also can be grouped according to their use.
Different types of quantifiers to define large quantities, small quantities, undefined quantities, and also to express the idea of a sufficient amount are many, much, some, any, little, fewer, a few, enough, all, and more. So these are most of the general ones and the ones you will are most common and that you'll see, but there are while dealing with quantifiers, you also need to understand the concept of countable and uncountable nouns and why they are important.
Countable nouns are meant for things you can count using numbers. So when in a sentence, the singular form will usually use an N or A. An example is, I own a cat. For counting numbers, there is a singular and plural form. On the other hand, uncountable nouns are used for things you can't count with numbers, and usually do not have a plural form. While using uncountable nouns, you will see words such as a lot of, a great deal of, and more.
Where it's answering a question that's great in number, you'll see words such as many, much, a lot, plenty of, and more. So an example of that is that there's not much work to do. So when you're seeing sentences with a small number, so the number is like less, you will see few, little, a few, fewer, less. And an example is there are a few seats left. There are many to explain and go over individually, but here are some of the most common ones and their specific examples.
The first word is many, and it's a large indefinite quantity. So it's also used with countable nouns in the plural. So it's used with two or so and shows an excessive quantity. For example, a sentence would be, there are too many things to choose from. That's expressing the excessive quantity. Another is some, which is an unspecified and limited quantity. It's used with both uncountable and countable nouns in the plural. A lot of these words change between which nouns they can and can't use, but for this one they can use both. An example is, there is some milk in the refrigerator. Next one is few or a few. It's a small indefinite quantity and only used with countable nouns. It's the type that one expresses a negative opinion and one reflects a positive one. So few reflects a negative and a few reflects a positive one. For example, there are a few tourists in the museum, which is negative. And then a positive one is, do you have a few nickels for the candy machine? Moving on to the next one, enough and plenty. It expresses the idea of being a sufficient quantity. They can go with both countable and uncountable nouns. Some examples are, we have plenty of time to get to the airport, and we have enough fruit for the week, which is expressing the idea of being a sufficient quantity.
Some of the information we already went over. Quantifiers are words and phrases used before a noun to indicate the quantity of something. When using quantifiers, you always have to be aware of whether they can be used with countable or uncountable nouns. They're always followed by a noun, and the noun is always used in the sentence. Sometimes in the sentence, the nouns are not needed because the sentence will make sense without them, but most times it's always followed. An example of a noun always being followed is saying, I have a few assignments to do today. The noun would be assignments, and without it, the sentence nouns give information about how much and how many of an object or item that is being talked about in the sentence. Lastly, going over some examples. So we talked about how there are different quantifiers, so with small, large quantities, and etc. So going with small quantities, you'll see a sentence such as, I had a few coins in my wallet. Going with large quantities, you'll see sentences including, my dad had a large amount of dogs in his house. The quantifier is used to express quantity. And they also give approximate and specific answers to questions of how much and how many. A lot of new information today and understand quantifiers much more now.